Gauravani Pracharini Nirvisesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desa Tarini Namo Mahabharanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namani Gaura Tvishe Namaha. Panchatatmakam Krishnam Bhakta Rupa Swarupakam Bhaktavataram Bhaktakyam Namami Bhakti Shaktikam. Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye. Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye. So I think in the lesson plan, they're counting on longer classes. So we'll have to work out how we can get through all this stuff. But this is chapter 1, no, canto 1, chapter 15. Pandavas retire timely. So yesterday we learned that Krishna had disappeared. That came out. Arjuna was very dejected. Yudhishthira was getting a lot of anxiety because he was seeing all these signs of Kali Yuga coming out. And something kind of interesting, I heard many years ago on the radio, and they used to have a radio show in Sweden. And they were reading this section, these descriptions of the Kali Yuga and coming. And some scientist phoned in and said, this is a description of a shift of the axis of the planet. Everything gets completely disturbed. This happens every once in a while. Okay, so Yudhishthira, this is what happens. And like I was saying yesterday, the Pandavas, they were so much loved Krishna, and they felt totally dependent on Krishna in every situation. So no matter what happened to them, they just took it in stride and depended on Krishna. Yudhishthira knew that the gambling match was dangerous, that he wasn't good at chess, but he figured whatever happened would be the will of the Lord, so he accepted the challenge. So these things are going on. All right, so text number 1. We'll skip the Sanskrit so we can move it. Arjuna, the celebrated friend of Krishna, was grief-stricken because of his strong feeling of separation from Krishna. Over and above all, Maharaj Yudhishthira's speculative inquiries. So we heard that Arjuna, it's saying in the purport, he couldn't reply, he was so distressed. And Yudhishthira was trying to avoid really asking if Krishna had disappeared. He knew it, but he didn't want to think about it. That's, maybe some of you have experienced that. If we lose a loved person, somebody that, then it's hard to accept that they're dead. Even though we know philosophy. So, due to grief, Arjuna's mouth and lotus-like heart had dried up. His body lost all luster. Now he's remembering the Supreme Lord. He could hardly speak. Amazing. So with great difficulty, checked the tears of grief that streamed from his eyes. He was very distressed because Lord Krishna was out of his sight, and he increasingly felt affection for him. So that's why in our Goswami line that separation is the highest thing. They have a saying I used to hear in English all the time: absence makes the heart grow fonder. You know, if you're separated from someone or something, your love for that thing increases, your desire to be with them. So that's why Krishna does those things. Like today's Ram Navami, so twice it was arranged. Sita was kidnapped. She was separated from Ram. Ram was separated from her. So they were both feeling this really intense separation. She was just chanting Ram, Ram, Ram all the time in distress. Ramachandra went mad. He was going to destroy the whole universe, with the idea that his wife was gone. Krishna left Vrindavan and left the gopis in total distress of separation. But then Krishna is never separated because they're always thinking of him. But in order to feel this separation, you have to have love. If we don't love Krishna, we won't feel separation. So therefore we can just, space out, forget Krishna, forget our, get absorbed in the news or something. But if we really love Krishna, then we're separated. We just never stop chanting. Text number 4. Remembering Lord Krishna and his well-wishers, benefactors, benefactions, intimate familial relationships, and chariot driving, Arjuna, overwhelmed and breathing very heavily, began to speak. Arjuna said, "O king, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Hari, who treated me exactly like an intimate friend, has left me alone. Thus, my astonishing power, which astonished even the demigods, is no longer with me." So Arjuna, the most powerful warrior, and he was eloquent also in speaking and everything, and he just became helpless, feeling without Krishna. So all our power, everything we have is really coming from Krishna. Chaitanya Charitamrita says, if we remember Lord Chaitanya, then the most difficult thing becomes very simple. And if we forget Lord Chaitanya, then the most simple thing becomes very difficult. So any powerful person, even the demons, it's actually given to them by Krishna, but they don't know that. They think it's due to their hard work and their tapasya. That's a factor Krishna will give them, but they don't recognize Krishna, so they will use it wrongly, use it against Krishna. It's a very terrible thing. Krishna gives opulence and then they misuse it or use it against him. I've just lost him whose separation for a moment would render all the universes unfavorable and void, like bodies without life. Number 7. Only by his merciful strength was I able to vanquish all the lusty princes assembled at the palace of King Drupad for his selection of the bridegroom. with my bow and arrow, I could pierce the fish target, and there I gained the hand of Draupadi. So that was a famous part. This is, and when we study this, we get understanding how the culture has become completely perverted. Previously, to get married, to get the beautiful daughter, the prince had to, prove himself. He had to fight. He had to, do these amazing, difficult tasks. He test the Swayambara, like to get Sita. Someone had to string that bow, which was a bow of Lord Shiva, and no one could even lift it. It took like 25 or so many men, I don't know how many, to just move it. Even Ravana couldn't even lift it, but Ramchandra could just lift it with one hand. Nowadays, the men say that the father has to pay them to take the daughter, and it's complete opposite. Because men want to have sons, and they need a wife. And so the wife is considered like the goddess of fortune coming in the house. So I think we know that story. Arjuna was disguised as a Brahmin, and somehow nobody could recognize him. Even though all the Pandavas were there, you'd think that Krishna would cover him over. And he was able to get the hand of Draupadi. But of course, Draupadi was born. Her father had done the yagya specifically to get a daughter that could marry Arjuna. Next verse 8. Because he was near, it was possible for me to conquer with great dexterity, the powerful king of heaven, Indra, along with the demigods, and thus enable the fire god to devastate the Kandava forest. And only by his grace was a demon named Maya saved from the blazing Kandava forest. And thus we could build our assembly house of wonderful architectural workmanship, where all the princes assembled during the performance of the Rajasuya sacrifice and paid tribute to Yudhishthira. That forest was somehow protected by Indra, and Agni had bad health due to all the impure offerings that have been given to him. So he needed to eat the forest that had all kinds of medicinal herbs, but Indra would always make it rain, and he couldn't devour it, he couldn't eat it because he eats by fire. So we asked Arjuna to help him, and Arjuna was able to shout so many arrows as like an umbrella and keep Indra back and the rain off. And so Agni could devour the whole forest. And then the demon Mayadanava was somehow hiding out there. And Arjuna protected him. So he became indebted. He's the architect of the demons. So he built the special assembly house that we heard about. Where an envious person couldn't see what the difference between the water or the floor or the door or the wall. So Duryodhana had a really hard time there. He just, there was water, but it looked like no water. When he stepped in the water and fell down, then he tried to leave. He was embarrassed. All the ladies were laughing at him. And Yudhishthira, being a gentleman, told the women, don't laugh. But Krishna said, no, laugh. So then he tried to leave and he thought he saw a door, but he walked right into the wall. And then Bhima helped him get up. So he was so angry, and that was one of the main things that really provoked him, because the Pandavas had a better place than him. He couldn't get such a nice assembly hall. So that's when he made the dice game. And to take their kingdom. The respectable younger brother who possesses the strength of 10,000 elephants, killed by his grace Jarasandha, whose feet were worshipped by many kings. These kings had been brought for sacrifice in Jarasandha's Mahabhairava Yagya, and they were thus released. Later they paid tribute to your majesty. So Arjuna is just remembering so many things about Krishna, and then just like everybody likes to remember their departed ancestors, so many people have picture books. But Krishna is all of our well-wisher, our best friend and our best grandfather, father, So we should also be remembering Krishna, because remembering Krishna is being with Krishna. Jarasandha, we know that story also. He worshipped Lord Shiva, he got so much power. By the help of Krishna, Bhima could kill him. It was only he who loosened the hairs of the wives of the miscreants who dared open the cluster of your queen's hair, which had been nicely dressed and sanctified for the Rajasuya sacrifice. So that means that after the battle of Kurukshetra was only by Krishna's grace. So all the wives of the Kurus who had made trouble for Draupadi became widows. So they let their hair down. Let's see. Civilized women, they keep their hair tied up nice in the back. They don't, and they never let it down until their husband dies. And that insult of Draupadi, Prabhupada said that was the main cause of the entire battle of Kurukshetra, to offend a lady like that. The Kurus were forcibly bringing her out, trying to strip her naked in public and insulting her, calling her a prostitute because she had many husbands. So this very nice. Arjuna is just giving us a summary of the life of the Pandavas. During our exile, Durvas Muni, who eats with 10,000 disciples, put us in a dangerous trouble because of an intrigue of our enemies. At that time, Lord Krishna, simply by accepting the remnants of food, saved us. By his accepting food, the assembly of Munis, while bathing in the river, felt already full. And all of the three worlds were also satisfied. Duryodhana had done great trabasya to please Durvasa Muni. And then Durvasa offered him a benediction. He said, go to the Pandavas who were in the forest with your disciples and demand a big feast or something. So Draupadi had this Akshaya Patra, this pot that would never empty, and it could serve any number of people until she ate from it, and then it wouldn't, the rest of the day it was ordinary. There was nothing left. So they came after the meal and everything was finished and Draupadi already ate. And they said, we'll go to the river and take a bath and then we'll come back food would be ready. So Draupadi cried out in distress for Krishna, and he came. And he asked her right away, "Do you have anything for me to eat?" And then she cried more. And she said, "We don't have anything, and this is the problem now you're asking us." Krishna says, "There must be something here." Finally, they found just a little piece of food, prasadam, that was stuck at the edge of the pot or something. And Krishna just took that tiny bit, and the whole universe became satisfied. They didn't feel any hunger and thirst. So Durvasa Muni and all his disciples, they also felt completely full and like they couldn't eat anymore. So Bhima ran down and said, come, a feast is ready. And they ran away because they didn't want to come and not be able to eat. So there's this Krishna. If Krishna just is satisfied, then everyone is satisfied. And if Krishna is not satisfied, then no one is satisfied. Purport, Prabhupada says, when the devotees are put into difficulty, they have an opportunity to recollect the Lord. Draupadi was thinking of Krishna in that dangerous position, and the all-providing Lord could know at once the dangerous position of his devotees. He therefore came there in the scene and asked Draupadi to give him whatever food, and it was no food practically. They didn't think there was any, but somebody had washed the pot, but maybe a little bit stuck on the lip. There's some very long purports here, and it's mostly the history of, these particular things I'm summarizing. Arjuna is remembering, when I stayed for some days as a guest in the heavenly planets, all the demigods, including Indra, took shelter of my arms, his weapons, his fighting, which were marked with the Gandiva bow, to kill the demon named Nivata Kachavacha, the descendant of Ajamita. At the present moment, I'm bereft of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, by whose influence I was so powerful. Arjuna went by himself and fought with his millions of some kind of Rakshasa, because they were more powerful than the demigods. So the Lord is all powerful, and by his grace, the devotee can be as powerful as him. There's no limit. And when the Lord withdraws his power from someone, he's powerless by the will of the Lord. So we need to stay in a humble state of mind so that we can get that power. If we're proud and think, I have this power, I have something, I've done something, then Krishna leaves, and then all of a sudden we have nothing. I'm still Arjuna, just remembering all these, he's just desperately trying to remember Krishna. And because otherwise you can't tolerate being separated. The thing about Krishna, when we remember Krishna, he's actually there. There's no loss. The military strength of the Kauravas was like an ocean in which there dwelled many invincible existences. Thus it was insurmountable. But because of his friendship, I, seated in a chariot, was able to cross over it. because of Krishna's friendship, Arjuna was able to defeat them, collect all their helmets. That was at another time. Arjuna all by himself, that was the time when they were still in exile, and they came, and Arjuna all alone fought off all the Kurus, Karna, and Karna ran away in fear. Only Bhishma, he wasn't defeated, but he pretended to be. So Arjuna used a special weapon to put everyone to sleep. And then he collected all their crowns and all their jewelry. So the Mahabharata history is given very, very much in these purports, which are very, very long. So if we were even to read a couple of them, it would take the whole class. But so I'm just summarizing. Getting all the different characters, and there's history of all these different great kings, and how Arjuna had to fight with them. So text 17. It was by his mercy only that my enemies neglected to kill me when I descended from my chariot to get water for my horses. And it was due to my lack of esteem for the Lord that I dared engage him as my chariot driver. For he is worshipped and offered services by the best men to attain salvation. So Arjuna is feeling like, he was puffed up in the wrong mood. But actually Krishna wanted to drive it, and Krishna is the chariot driver of everyone. Arjuna knew when he took Krishna on his side that Krishna wasn't going to fight. But he knew that if he had Krishna, no, he couldn't be defeated. Duryodhana thought it was a better deal to get the big army of Krishna. He didn't need Krishna. He's a fool. But this is something that is astounding to devotee. And they think about Krishna driving the chariot for Arjuna and running messages and doing so many servant type activities for the Pandavas. But that's the Supreme Lord. He'll serve his devotee. And actually, Krishna is driving our chariot, sitting in the heart. But we're telling him, go here, go do there, and we're not taking advantage to always ask Krishna to take us to the temple, take us to Sankirtan spot, take us, out to preach. But so he's trying to tell us to remember him all the time, but sometimes we forget. So Arjuna was good friends with Krishna. His jokes and frank talks were pleasing and decorated with smiles. He would say, "O son of Prita, O friend, O son of Kuru," all such dealings. Text 19. Generally, both of us used to live together and sleep, sit, and loiter together. And at the time of advertising oneself for acts of chivalry, if there was any irregularity, I would reproach him by saying, my friend, you are very truthful. Even in these hours, when his value was minimized, he, being the Supreme Soul, used to tolerate all these utterings of mine, excusing me exactly as a true friend excuses a true friend, or a father excuses his son. In Bhagavad Gita, chapter 11, Arjuna also asked Krishna, forgive me like a father forgives a child, and things like that. Now he's saying how Krishna did that. And he's doing it for us all the time. And again, today's Ramchandra's day. A famous verse of his, which is consistent with Bhagavad Gita. When Bibhishan came, the monkey soldiers were thinking, he's a Rakshasa. He's a brother of Kamsa, or Ravana, he must be a spy, and you should kill him right away. And Ramchandra was defending him, and he must be good. Then he's mentioning how he was guarding the bodies of the wives of Krishna, and he was attacked by a bunch of coward men and defeated because he couldn't remember Krishna, and he had lost all his power for fighting. But actually, that was Krishna's Leela. It's also mentioned that those coward men were actually Krishna. I have the same Gandiva bow, the same arrows, the same chariot, same horses, and I'm the same Arjuna. But in the absence of Lord Krishna, all of them have become null and void, exactly like offering clarified butter onto ashes. As in the ocean, the bigger and stronger aquatics swallow up the smaller and weaker ones. So also the Supreme Lord, to lighten the burden of the earth, has engaged the stronger Yadu to kill the weaker, and the bigger Yadu to kill the smaller. So now he's revealing to Yudhishthira that the other dynasties all been killed off. They killed each other. In this example, I think, I don't know if you say that in Nigeria or Ghana, in America, it's common. The big fish eats the little fish. So in the material world, without Krishna, then the strong are exploiting the weak instead of trying to help the weak. The duty of a kshatriya is to help the weak people. He's strong, so he's supposed to protect and help those who are weak. But nowadays, if someone is strong, they get power, then they want to exploit. They want to conquer. They want to take more and more for themselves. And it's not only nowadays. There was Hiranyakasipu started with, and so many since then. That's called the struggle for existence and the survival of the fittest. Those are laws of nature. Everybody's struggling. So in the animal kingdom, there's a leader of the tribe or the pack, and they fight and one unconscious. And we struggle. So that's going on everywhere on all different levels. Now I'm attracted to those instructions imparted to me by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, because they were impregnated with instructions for relieving the burning heart in all circumstances of time and space. So here he's referring to the Bhagavad Gita. When he remembers the Bhagavad Gita, then he comes back to life. When he's forgetting it, then he loses his power. So we want to remember it. We want to read it again and again. We don't have that in this way. It's exactly the same. When Krishna is speaking personally to Arjuna, he's also speaking personally to you when you read it. Living entities are eternal, and we're not meant to live in this temporary world. But while we're living in it, we take shelter of Krishna, we can get out, even though we're in, and get others out also. That's the duty, take advantage. You get the power from Krishna, then you help others connect. Sutta Goswami said, so being deeply absorbed in thinking of the instructions of the Lord, which are imparted in a great intimacy of friendship, and in thinking of his lotus feet, Arjuna's mind became pacified and free from material contamination. That should be how it is for us when we read Bhagavad Gita. And that's the highest meditation. Nowadays, meditation is popular. Just reading Krishna book is the highest meditation. Reading Bhagavad Gita, that's real meditation, because we can think of Krishna. Because of his possessing spiritual assets, the doubts of duality were completely cut off. Thus, he freed from the three modes of material nature and placed in transcendence. No longer any chance of his becoming entangled in birth and death, for he is freed from material form. So that's just the power of this intense memory, remembering Krishna. It's actually a good exercise for us to remember different times in our life how Krishna helped us, devotees helped us through terrible tough times or whatever, and then we get liberated. We get free from duality. When we're free from duality, then one can think of Krishna. Yesham tantikatam papam jananam punya karmanam. So Arjuna, he'd already achieved this high state by hearing Bhagavad Gita. Now he's remembering it and he's liberated. Upon seeing the Lord's, upon hearing of Lord Krishna returning to his abode, and upon understanding the end of the Yadu dynasty's earthly manifestation, Yudhisthira decided to go back home, back to Godhead. So it didn't take him very long. No use staying on earth without Krishna, even though he's a king. And Yudhisthira was such an opulent king that even the demigods were bewildered to see how opulent he was. But he could just give it all up in a second, knowing that Krishna was no longer on earth. That he wasn't attached to being king, he was only attached to Krishna. So he decided to go back to Godhead, and they had their way of doing that. Next verse. Kunti, after hearing Arjuna's telling the end of the other dynasty and disappearance of Lord Krishna, engaged in the devotional service of the transcendental personality of Godhead. Kunti engaged in devotional service of the transcendental personality of Godhead, and with attention gained release from the course of material existence. So the Pandavas are, of course, eternal associates of Krishna. They're always with Krishna in every universe when he travels. The Supreme Unborn Krishna caused the members of the other dynasty to relinquish their bodies, and thus he relieved the burden of the world. This action was like picking out a thorn with a thorn, although both are the same to the controller. So I hope everybody knows the story on the Yadu dynasty. They were cursed, actually. Gandhari had cursed Krishna right after the battle that his family members would fight amongst themselves and all get killed. And Krishna wanted that because the others were so powerful. He was worried that after he left the earth, the others would be too powerful and would get puffed up and people would honor them too much. So he arranged this fight and they all killed each other because they were too powerful. No one else could kill them. And Krishna Balaram personally killed many of them. It was a drunken fight. So that's to show that intoxication is bad. And family quarrels are not productive. We shouldn't quarrel with other devotees. The Supreme Lord relinquished the body which he had manifested to diminish the burden of the earth, just like a magician. He relinquishes one body to accept different ones, like the fish incarnation and others. So Krishna just changed bodies, but he didn't really become the body. When Krishna is a fish or whatever species he appears in, he's still Krishna completely. He's not. If we have to take the body of a fish or a tree or a pig, then we'll be a fish or a tree or a pig. We have the same consciousness and we'll be trapped and limited. But for Krishna, it's just a disguise, just an illusion. He just looks like that and it's completely real to all of us. But he's still Krishna. When the personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna, left this earthly planet with his self-same form, from that very day, Kali, who had already partially appeared, became fully manifest to create inauspicious conditions for those who were endowed with a poor fund of knowledge. So Kali will come. It's just like winter, summer comes, rainy seasons come. Krishna has arranged it. Kali, the age of Kali comes, but Krishna can hold it back. And now the Sankirtan movement can hold it back. For those who are seriously chanting, Kali can't approach them. But he's making so many things go on in the world, so much quarreling, expanding beyond just families and countries, even planets. We're always seeing the science fiction movies that are so popular. the inhabitants of different planets are fighting with each other all over the universe. But this is Kali, and there's so much gambling, so much intoxication, so much, especially prostitution, illicit sex, just promoted everywhere. And Kali's arranging more and more facility for sex, for gambling, especially now with the internet. The internet's also a very good facility for us to spread Krishna consciousness. The Kali is what we have to fight against. And the Harinam Sankirtan and book distribution, that is a way to fight against Kali. Yudhishthira was intelligent enough to understand the influence of the age of Kali, characterized by increasing avarice, falsehood, cheating. Wow. Thereafter, in the capital of Hastinapur, he enthroned his grandson, who was trained and equally qualified as the emperor and master of all land, headed by the sea. Thereafter, in the capital of Hastinapur, he enthroned his grandson, that's Parikshit. He was still very young, but he was trained. He had a minister to take over for a little while. But we knew from his birth, and he had all the good qualities of all the dynasty and all the previous kings and Arjuna. He posted Vajra, the son of Aniruddha, who was the grandson of Krishna, at Mathura as the king of Surasena. Afterward, Maharaj Yudhishthira performed a Prajapacha sacrifice and placed himself in the fire by quitting household life. So Vajra and King Parikshit, they spent a lot of time in Braj, and they established so many temples and deities, not temples so much, but deities all over Braj. And he built up the whole Mathura area, which was not a big temple. And Vajra made, like the Gopal deity and the Govinda deity, the Radha Govinda. He had those deities carved because that wife of Abhimanyu was still living and she had seen Krishna. So she was supervising the making of the murti to set it, make sure it looked like Krishna. Yudhishthira at once relinquished all his garments, belt and ornaments of the royal order and became completely disinterested and unattached to everything. So without Krishna, the kingdom was nothing for him. It was just headache. But Krishna wanted him to be the king, so he did it. But immediately that he knew that Krishna was gone, he immediately just gave up all the clothes and all the signs and all the decorations of being a king. Quite, incredible. And that's it. Then he amalgamated all the sense organs into the mind, and the mind into life, life into breathing, and the total existence into the embodiment of the five elements, and his body unto death, and his sphere self became free from the material conception of life. That's a yoga process, because these kings, they studied this kind of yoga. Bhakti yoga doesn't necessarily have to do that, but it's a mental process of just giving up all these elements of the body. Thus, amalgamating the gross body into the five elements of the three qualitative modes of nature, he merged the modes into one nescience and then absorbed that nescience into the self, which is inexhaustible in all circumstances. That's also described in the second canto, how the yogis. After that, Yudhisthira dressed himself in torn clothing, gave up all eating of solid foods, voluntarily became dumb, and let his hair hang loose. All this combined to make him look like an urban skeleton. He then started toward the north, treading the path accepted by the forefathers and great men, to devote himself completely to the thought of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he lived in that way wherever he went. So it's quite amazing. He didn't discuss it with anybody. He didn't, he just obviously had this plan. So as soon as he actually knew that Krishna was gone, he just gave up everything, gave up the kingdom, gave up family, just put only Krishna, and went towards the north, which, of course, that's the Himalayas are north of Delhi. The younger brothers of Maharaj Yudhisthira observed that the age of Kali had already arrived throughout the world, and that the citizens of the kingdom were already affected by irreligious practices. Therefore, they decided to follow the footsteps of their elder brother. So any one of them could have also become the king, because they're the younger brothers of the king. They weren't interested either. Normally in material history, if something like this happened, then the brothers would be fighting like anything to who's going to be the next king and killing each other like that Aurangzeb did. They all had performed all the principles of religion, and as a result, rightly decided that the lotus feet of Lord Krishna are the supreme goal of life. Therefore, they meditated upon this feet without interruption. So they were all great devotees also. And they just completely gave up everything for Krishna. And followed Yudhisthira. They had always followed Yudhisthira all along. He accepted the elder brother as a representative of God and the Father, and they just followed him. They didn't agree all the time, and they would discuss. He would let them present their ideas, but in the long run, they would always follow Yudhisthira. Thus, by pure consciousness, due to constant devotional remembrance, they attained the spiritual sky which is ruled over by the Supreme Narayan, Lord Krishna. This is attained only by those who meditate upon the Supreme Lord without deviation. This abode of the Lord Sri Krishna, known as Goloka Vrindavan, cannot be attained by the Thus, this is attained only by those who meditate upon the Supreme Lord without deviation. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Satatam Kirtayanto Mam, the devotees. This abode of Lord Sri Krishna, known as Goloka Vrindavan, cannot be attained by persons who are absorbed in the material conception of life, but the Pandavas, being completely washed of all material contamination, attained that abode in their very same bodies. Nice purport. Sanatana Goswami says that a person, whatever he may be, can attain life perfection of a twice born Brahman by undergoing the spiritual disciplinary actions under the guidance of the bona fide spiritual master, exactly like a chemist can turn gunmetal into gold by chemical manipulation. It is therefore the actual guidance that matters in the process of becoming a Brahmana. Even without change of body or without, and going back to Godhead, without change of body, Jiva Goswami remarks that the word is used in connection, positively affirm this truth, and there's no doubt about this. (49) Vidura, while on pilgrimage, left his body at Prabhasa. Because he was absorbed in thought of Lord Krishna, he was received by the denizens of the Pitri-loka, where he attained to his original post. Of course, that's Yamaraj. Pitri-loka is the planet of the ancestors. Some Christian groups, they want to go there and just be with their family and live the same as before. But that's not why Vidura went there. Vidura, he's Yamaraj, so he was on a holiday and was just living on earth for some time so he could just concentrate on worshiping Krishna. Because Yamaraj is the busiest of all the demigods. So many sinful people coming all the time. Draupadi also saw her husbands, without caring for her, were leaving home. She knew well about Lord Vasudeva Krishna and the personality of Godhead. Both she and Subhadra became absorbed in thoughts of Krishna and attained the same results as her brother. The subject of the departure of the sons of Pandu for the ultimate goal of life, back to Godhead, is fully auspicious and perfectly pure. Therefore, anyone who hears this narration with devotional faith certainly gains the devotional service of the Lord, the highest perfection of life. So I hope we all have faith. This is always mentioned. throughout the Bhagavatam, there's these kind of blessings at the end of chapters. In the Bhagavad Gita also. And it's always saying with faith and devotion. If we hear these pastimes with faith and devotion, and we really believe that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and by hearing them, we're going to gain spiritual perfection, and we will. If one is reading it scholastically to gain some skill in argument or to show off his knowledge, then it doesn't have the same effect. We want to read it simply to associate with. Here we had intimate association with Arjuna when he's revealing his, intense love for Krishna. In the previous chapter, we got close association with Yudhishthira in his really intense moments of his life. So please pray for faith and devotion. That means we really believe it. These are not just mythological stories. There's actually Krishna. These are actual events that happened and they're still happening somewhere in the universe. The Bhagavatam is promising in so many. We were just reading Varaha Lila, same thing. It says anybody who hears this with faith, will get all these love of God. So that chapter we got through pretty quick. I have to take a couple of minutes break and I'll be right back. Maybe you can discuss amongst yourselves anything caught your attention in this chapter, and then tell me about it when I get back, and just run to the restroom.
Yadunan Baba. You are the king of the lake of Manso.
I will glad not day practical today or today in our festival. I'm a temple president. When you don't have people, you have to share yourself and divide yourself everywhere. So come class today not look practical at all, honestly.
Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare Rama 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 Hare
Okay, back. So let's see if you have any comments about that chapter. Quite fascinating, actually. Yadunath, Jai. Who is Infinix? They're still making those Infinix phones, huh? I had one once. Didn't last very long. Anyway, we can see that this is what we're hoping for in our life, is that this complete attachment to Krishna and realization that, we're nothing without Krishna. Krishna never really leaves. Prabhupada never really left, because he left all his teachings and books behind. Krishna left behind Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavatam. Prabhupada also did with his commentary, because Prabhupada is what gives us access to Krishna. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to get access to Krishna. And now by the association of devotees. So we should always be thinking, I need Krishna, and we should be thinking how we can be with devotees, how we can be engaged in devotional service, how we can be hearing Bhagavatam, how can we be spreading the holy name. That's our life. So anybody, question or comment? I know you're getting ready for Ramachandra. It's always a controversy about how long to fast. Prabhupada, from the beginning, he said until evening. But then in India, it's a tradition has always been until noon. So our Sastric Advisory Committee researched and concluded either or, because different times, even Prabhupada said different things, and different places they do it, and sometimes noon. I know in Vrindavan, on the day, it was Ram Navami was the day of the installation of the deities in Vrindavan. And the feast was at noon. Everybody feasted like anything. So that's what they do in Vrindavan. But there's no harm ever to fast too much. To not fast can be risky. To fast too much extra is always good. Sutuvacha Chatak Parikit Dvijavari. This is a new chapter. How Parikit received the age of Kali. Everything in the Bhagavatam is super important, but this chapter is quite telling. Suta Goswami said, O learned Brahmana, Maharaj Parikit then began to rule over the world as a great devotee of the Lord, under the instruction of the best of the twice-born Brahmins. He ruled by those great qualities which were foretold by expert astrologers at the time of his birth. So at the time of his birth, the higher caste people, when a child is born, they always had an astrologer. Astrologer predicted that Prabhupada would leave India and establish 108 temples, and he did that. But also Prabhupada didn't encourage us to consult astrologers very much. So Maharaj had all these qualities of a great king, but the real thing is to be a devotee. So today is Ramachandra's appearance day. He also showed us qualities of a king, a leader. So if you're a temple president, if you're a zonal leader or whatever, if you're a husband, if you're a father, you should definitely study the qualities of Lord Ramachandra and pray that we can be like that. Ramachandra, if somebody was complaining about him and not satisfied, he would think, what am I doing wrong, and how can I change the way I act so this person will not feel like that? He wouldn't just say the person is a big rascal and get rid of him, like many kings would do. So Mahaprikit was a great devotee from before he was born. Saw Krishna while he was in the womb. Kings all had advisors, and they would follow the advice. And the advisors were all sages and brahmanas. So he married the daughter of King Uttara and had 4 sons. The oldest was Janamejaya. Uttara was the son of Virata. So that's the brother of the wife of Abhimanyu. His uncle. So we have in these purports a lot of history of all these different personalities. Text 3. Prikit, after having selected Kripacharya for guidance as his spiritual master, performed 3 horse sacrifices on the banks of the Ganges. They were executed with lavish awards to the attendants. And at these sacrifices, even the common man could see the demigods. So that's a very big thing. 3 Ashwamedha yagyas, because only a king can do an Ashwamedha yagya. And it's not easy even for kings, only big kings. He did 3. So that's how powerful he was. And at that time, the demigods would actually come and attend the yagyas. So once when he went out to conquer the world, he saw the master of Kali Yuga, who was lower than a Shudra, disguised as a king and herding the legs of a cow and bull. The king at once caught hold of him and dealt sufficient punishment. The purpose of the king's going out to conquer the world is not for self-aggrandizement. Very important point. Prikit went out to conquer the world after his ascendance to the throne, but this was not for the purpose of aggression on other states. He was emperor of the world, and all small states were already under his regime. His purpose in going out was to see how things were going on in terms of the godly state. The king, being the representative of the Lord, has to execute the will of the Lord duly. There's no question of self-aggrandizement. Thus, as soon as Prikit saw that the lower class men in the dress of a king was herding the legs of a cow and bull, he arrested and punished him. The king cannot tolerate insults to the most important animal, the cow, nor can he tolerate disrespect for the Brahmins. No, we don't find so many kings like that anymore. The government is licensing slaughterhouses and closing churches. Shonaka inquired, why did Prikit simply punish him since he was the lowest of all Sudras, having dressed as a king and struck the leg of a cow? Please describe all these incidents if they relate to the topics of Lord Krishna. So this is what the sages are interested, the things that relate to topics of Krishna. So they were wondering why he didn't kill Kali. He just simply gave him a little punishment because he'd done a very great offense. To dress as a king when he's really a Sudra, and then to be killing a cow, which is not even Sudra, way below. At that time, nobody ever killed a cow. The meat eaters, dog eaters, and other animals, but not cows. Please speak of topics related to devotees of the Lord who are accustomed to licking up the honey and available from the lotus feet of the Lord. What is the use of topics which simply waste one's valuable life? In other words, topics that aren't about Krishna, are not about the devotees of Krishna, are simply Shama Evi Kevalam, certainly, exclusively, only a waste of time. The questioning still. O Suta Goswami, there are those amongst men who desire to become free from death and get eternal life instead of a short life. They escape the slaughtering process by calling the controller of death, Yamaraj. Prabhupada in the purport, he's way ahead of time, but now this has become more and more of a thing. Modern scientists try to avoid death by physiochemical advancement of knowledge. But unless the controller of death, Yamaraj, is so cruel that he does not spare even the very life of the scientist himself. The scientist puts forward a theory of stopping death by advancement of scientific knowledge, becomes a victim of death when he is called by Yamaraj. What to speak of stopping death? No one can enhance a short period of life, even by a fraction of a moment. The only hope is suspending the cruel slaughtering process of Yamaraj is to call him to hear and chant the holy name of the Lord. Yeah, when they had yagas, they would invite Yamaraj. So it's interesting. I read something, somebody was saying that the most dangerous words in the English language is, I don't have time. Because, we think I don't have time to chant my rounds, or I don't have time to do some service, or don't have time to whatever. Devotee thinks I don't have time to sleep. So in one sense, that's true, because we have to utilize the time. If we say, I don't have time to do something, then we'll be in trouble because we won't do things that we should be doing. But in another sense, we don't have time to engage in sense gratification because life is short and we don't know how short. But even if we live the maximum 80 or 100 years, which is not so common anymore, it's not much time to, get our life together and organize our life so that everything is centered around Krishna. So in one sense, we shouldn't say, I don't have time. We don't have time. We should say to Maya, I don't have time. But to Krishna, we better say, I do have time. Krishna is time. So he'll give us time to do whatever we have to do to serve him nicely. Okay, time I am, Krishna says, and I've come here to engage everyone. Text number 8. As long as Yamaraj, who causes everyone's death, is present here, no one shall meet with death. The great sages have invited the controller of death, Yamaraj, who is the representative of the Lord. Living beings who are under his grip should take advantage of hearing the deathless nectar in the form of narration of the transcendental pastimes of the Lord. So the way to avoid death is to become accustomed to hearing the nectarine pastimes of the Lord as they are systematically narrated in the Srimad Bhagavatam. So you're very fortunate that you signed up for this chance to hear the Srimad Bhagavatam in a very intense way. Just hearing the Bhagavatam is, magical, and we won't really realize it. We can feel very happy reading it, but gradually we read it regularly like this, we'll get so much. All right. Number 9, lazy human beings with paltry intelligence and short duration of life pass the night sleeping and the day performing activities that are for naught. In other words, just for eating and sleeping. We sleep all night so we can get energy to work hard in the next day, so that we can sleep at night, something like that. We see here, and I guess you see it anywhere, but New York City, sometimes we have to go somewhere early in the morning. And the traffic coming into the city is just unbelievable. Millions of cars just barely moving. And then in the evening, same thing going out. This is every city in the world. So many people, they're spending 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours at night, going to work and going home. So when they get home, they can barely eat and watch television, go to sleep. It's very unfortunate that no time for Krishna, I think. Krishna is time, and anybody can, and when one develops, they can think of Krishna even while he's working. So Krishna tells Arjuna, think of me and fight. So text 10, while Maharaj Parikshit was residing in the capital of the Kuru Empire, the symptoms of the age of Kali began to infiltrate within the jurisdiction of his state. When he learned about this, he did not think the matter very palatable. He did, however, give him a chance to fight, and he took up his bow and arrow and prepared for military activities. So he got news that Kali Yuga symptoms were showing up. What are these symptoms? Illicit connection with women, which is considered necessary practically now. Indulgence in meat eating, intoxication, taking pleasure in gambling. So these things are increasing. I remember when we got on the radio there in the GBC, the Ghana Broadcasting, almost every time they'd ask what's wrong with gambling. People think gambling's like some fun, and they can be thinking they can win. They can be imagining if they win, they won't have to work again. But it's the most addictive of all the sinful activities and drives people crazy. Intoxication is advertised everywhere. Illicit sex is used to advertise all the other sinful activities. So Kali has to happen, but then Lord Chaitanya is giving us a chance to be out from Kali. 11. Prickett sat in a chariot drawn by black horses. His flag was marked with the sign of a lion. Being so decorated, he's surrounded by charioteers, cavalry, elephants, and infantry soldiers. He left the capital to conquer in all directions. Took a whole army with him. Of course, in the Kali Yuga, the king usually is, because he's a king and he has more money, he's engaging in these sinful activities even more. That was one of the ways that the British conquered India. They polluted the Indian kings and got them into intoxication and gambling, especially intoxication, and weakened them. So, but generally, the king is the biggest debauch. He has the most money. You can enjoy even more than anyone else. And people want to become the king, or they want to become the leader, so that they can have more facility for sense gratification. A good king is pure. He won't allow these things to go on in his kingdom. Maharaj Prickett then conquered all parts of earth, Vajrashva, Ketamala, Bharata, the northern Kuru, King Purusha, etc., and extracted tributes from their respective rulers. So this was his conquering. Mostly he didn't have to fight. Everyone would just surrender. Then we get descriptions of all the different parts of the Earth planet. So it's talking about the whole planet. The whole planet was called Bharatvarsha. Now they call this what's now called India. Very small area. It's called Bharat. But it was the whole planet was ruled by one king. Modern people, we'd say, well, how could he do that? They didn't have radio and internet, and they didn't have airplanes to move so fast. But they had connections. They had people, and they could somehow mystically do it and run it much better than nowadays. Whenever the king visited, he continuously heard the glories of his great forefathers, who were all devotees of the Lord, and also the glorious acts of Lord Krishna. He also heard how he himself had been protected by the Lord from the powerful heat of the weapons of Ashwatthama. People also mentioned the great affection between the descendants of Vrishni and Prita due to the latter's great devotion to Lord Krishna. The king, being very pleased with the singers of such glories, opened his eyes in great satisfaction. Out of magnanimity, he was pleased to award them very beautiful, valuable necklaces and jewelry. That's for the professional singers. Then they would sing the glories of the king and his relatives and Krishna, and spread that around to the people. Now the professional singers sing there are singers who sing the gospel songs, but mostly they're singing the glories of sense gratification. The king would like to hear these things, but not in a false ego way, but happy to know that he was following and such. Like we like to hear about Ramachandra, we like to hear about Dhruva Maharaj, we like to hear about Bhakti Vinod Thakur and Bhakti Siddhanta and everybody, because it's purifying. Maharaj Parikshit heard that out of his causeless mercy of Lord Krishna, who was universally obeyed and rendered all kinds of service to the malleable sons of Pandu by accepting posts ranging from chariot driver to president to messenger, friend, night watchman, according to the will of the Pandavas, obeying them like a servant and offering obeisances like one younger in years. When he heard this, Maharaj Parikshit became overwhelmed with devotion to the lotus feet of Krishna. Hare Krishna. Okay, we're moving along. Now you may hear from me of what happened not far from Maharaj Parikshit when he was passing his days, hearing of the good occupation of his forefathers and being absorbed in thoughts of them. So most of the kingdoms, everything was all right. And people were just engaged in glorifying the Pandavas, glorifying Krishna. But this is not far away. The personality of religious principles, Dharma, was wandering in the form of a bull. And then he met the form of the earth in the form of a cow who appeared to be grieving like a mother who had lost her child. She had tears in her eyes. The beauty of her body was lost. So Dharma questioned the earth as follows. Dharma, in the form of a bull, asked, "Madam, are you not hale and hearty? Why are you covered with a shadow of grief? It appears that your face, that you have become black. Are you suffering from some internal disease? Or are you thinking that some relative was away in a far distant place?" When it says black like this, it doesn't mean color. It's meaning darkness. Can't see anything. Black life looks like hopeless. Anybody can have that. I have lost 3 legs and I'm now standing on only one. Are you lamenting for my state of existence? This is the bull, Dharma speaking. Kali Yuga, only 1 leg is left of the 4 pious activities. Or are you in great anxiety because henceforward the unlawful meat-eaters will exploit you? Or are you in sorry plight because the demigods are bereft of their share of the sacrificial offerings because no sacrifices are being performed at present? Or are you grieving for the living beings because of their suffering, famine, and whatever? So he's asking his questions, something like Yudhishthira asking Arjuna, why are you not happy? So he's coming up with all these different reasons why it may not be. So Prabhupada mentions in the Malechas make plans to make slaughterhouses and killing bulls and cows, thinking that will help. Like years ago, India supposedly had a, was poor, and American or British, people came in and they observed, and they told them, you have all these cows, you should increase your slaughterhouses and efficiency, and then you can make so much money selling all these cows. And unfortunately, they've done that. That was one of the British plans to destroy the Vedic culture, was to eliminate cows, tell people buffaloes are better. Very crazy. They've automated the slaughterhouse to the point where they can just kill them so fast. Not like you see in Africa where they just kill them out, with an axe or something. And one at a time. This is a horrible thing. And then they waste so much land just to feed all these animals so the people can eat a lot of meat. And the grains, the same amount of land could feed so many people if they just give them the grains. Okay, one more. Are you feeling sorry for the unhappy women and children who are left forlorn by unscrupulous persons? Or are you unhappy because the goddess of learning is being handled by brahmanas addicted to acts against the principles of religion? That means the educational system. So even then, it was starting that the brahmanas were being corrupt, because that's the beginning of Kali Yuga. So the brahmanas are not teaching properly. They're charging specific fees for their work. Or have you, sorry to see that the brahmanas have taken shelter of administrative families that do not respect Brahminical culture. It means the brahmanas are taking money from the kings to do things the way the king wants. And of course, that was 5,000 years ago. So now it's much, much worse. The so-called administrators are now bewildered by the influence of the sage of Kali, and they have put all state affairs into disorder. Are you now lamenting this disorder? Now the general populace does not follow the rules and regulations for eating, sleeping, drinking, mating, etc., and they are inclined to perform such anywhere and everywhere. Are you unhappy because of this? So he's covering a lot of ground. Why the cow is crying? The earth is crying. If you imagine now, that's why some people are waking up trying to be environmentalists, and we as devotees should be very conscious, of the environment, not wasting. It's amazing how much, nowadays everything comes in plastic bottles and plastic wrappers. Mother Earth, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, incarnate himself as Lord Shri Krishna, just to unload your heavy burden. All his activities here are transcendental, and they cement the path of liberation. You are now bereft of his presence. You are probably now thinking of those activities and feeling sorry. Yeah. It said the earth was feeling most separation from Krishna, because Krishna, his feet were always in contact with the earth, as long as he was on earth. She had the most association. Mother, you are the reservoir of all riches. Please inform me of the root cause of your tribulations, by which you have been reduced to such a weak state. I think that the powerful influence of time, which conquers the most powerful, might have forcibly taken away all your fortune, which was adored even by the demigods. I hope you're all following this. This is quite, The earthly deity in the form of a cow thus replied to the personality of religious. O Dharma, whatever you have inquired for me is already known to you, yet I shall try to reply to all these questions. Once you too were maintained by your four legs, and you increased happiness all over the universe by the mercy of the Lord. Dharma. So, purport, the principles of religion are laid down by the Lord himself, and the executor of laws is Dharmaraj or Yamaraj. Such principles work fully in the age of such a yuga. In the Treta Yuga, they are reduced by a fraction of 1/4. In the Dwapara Yuga, they are reduced to 1/2. And in the Kali Yuga, they are reduced to 1/4. That's from the beginning of Kali Yuga, and gradually diminishing to 0. And then devastation takes place. Happiness in the world depends proportionately on the maintenance of the religious principles, individually or collectively. The best part of valor is to maintain the principles despite all kinds of odds. Thus, one can be happy during the span of life and ultimately go back home, back to Godhead. It means that the best thing for us to do is follow these principles. Prabhupada gave us principles of freedom, regulated principles of freedom. Common people will think that these, the regular principles we have, that's like some kind of torture. Depriving, rights. Like in America, that women are campaigning for the right to abortion. It's my body and nobody can tell me, but that baby inside is not your body, it's a separate living entity. So they're crazy. So we'll just finish with this one verse here, which is giving all the good qualities of Krishna. Truthfulness, cleanliness, intolerance of others' unhappiness, that's compassion. Bhakti Vinod, when he's writing about, being an ordinary person, he said, I take great pleasure to see others unhappy. And when I see others happy, I become unhappy. This is unfortunate condition of the material world. The power to control anger, self-satisfaction, straightforwardness, steadiness of mind, control of the senses, responsibility, equality, tolerance, equanimity, faithfulness, knowledge, absence of sense enjoyment, leadership, chivalry, influence, the power to make everything possible, the discharge of proper duty, complete independence, dexterity, fullness of all beauty, serenity, kind-heartedness, ingenuity, gentility, magnanimity, determination, perfection in all knowledge, proper execution, possession of all objects of enjoyment, joyfulness, immovability, fidelity, fame, being worshipable, pridelessness, being the personality of Godhead, eternity, and many other transcendental qualities which are eternally present and never to be separated from Him. The personality of Godhead, the reservoir of all goodness and beauty, Lord Sri Krishna, has now closed His transcendental pastimes on the face of the earth. In His absence, the age of Kali has spread His influence everywhere. So I'm sorry to see this condition of existence. Okay, purport. Even if it were possible to count the atoms after smashing the earth into powder, still it would not be possible to estimate the unfathomable transcendental qualities of the Lord. It is said that Lord Anantadev has tried to expound the transcendental qualities of the Supreme Lord with his numberless tongues, at the numberless years. Together, it has been impossible to estimate the qualities of the Lord. The above statement of the qualities of the Lord is just to estimate His qualities as far as the human being is able to see them in Him. But even if it is so, the above statement of the qualities of the Lord is just to estimate His qualities as far as a human being is able to see them. Now, something interesting, I don't know how scientists calculate this. If you look in the internet under sand magnified, you'll see that a grain of sand, they look like jewels, every one of them. But the scientists say that in one grain of sand, there's more atoms than there are grains of sand on the whole planet. Now, I don't know how they count, but just to give you some idea how small the atom is. And Krishna is within every atom, but He's also, everything is within Krishna. Even if it is so, the above qualities can be divided into many subheadings. According to Jiva Goswami, the third quality, tolerance, intolerance of others' unhappiness, can be divided into two: protection of the surrendered souls, good wishes of devotee, and Sankirtan. Devotees can't stand to see how everybody's rushing to hell, and they want to help them, so they go out on Sankirtan. And we see devotees are suffering if they're not out preaching, and we want to get them out. In the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord states that He wants every soul to surrender to Him only, and He assures everyone that if one does so, He will give protection from the reactions of all sins. Unsurrendered souls are not devotees of the Lord, thus no particular protection for everyone in general. For the devotees, He has all good wishes, and for those who are actually engaged in loving transcendental service, He gives particular attention. He gives direction to such pure devotees to help them discharge their responsibilities on the path back to Godhead. Equality number 10 indicates that the Lord is equally kind to everyone, as the sun is equal in distributing its rays over everyone. Yet there are many who are unable to take advantage of the sun's rays. Similarly, the Lord says that surrendering unto Him is a guarantee of all protection from Him. But unfortunate persons are unable to accept this proposition. Therefore, they suffer all material miseries. So even though the Lord is equally well-wishing to everyone, the unfortunate living being, due to bad association only, is unable to accept his instructions in full. In such a situation, the personality Godhead incarnates to vanquish the unwanted asuras and to reestablish the true principles of religion. This is the mission of Lord Krishna, and he fulfilled it. So it's time to stop this class, and actually there's only 2 verses left, so we'll finish this chapter. Who therefore can tolerate the pangs of separation from the Supreme Personality of Godhead? He could conquer the gravity and passionate wrath of his sweethearts like Satyabhama by his sweet smile of love, pleasing glance, and hearty appeals. When he traversed my earth's surface, I would be immersed in the dust of his lotus feet, and thus would be sumptuously covered with grass, which appeared like hairs standing out on me out of pleasure. Well, that's mentioning that the earth really felt separation because Krishna was always walking on the earth. The last verse. While the earth and the personality of religion were thus engaged in conversation, Parikshit reached the shore of the Saraswati River, which flowed toward the east. Thus ends the Bhakti Vedanta purports of the first canto, 16th chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam, titled How Parikshit Received the Age of Kali. So thank you all for coming, and these qualities that were listed back a few verses, I recommend just during the week, study those, see if you can, pick out a few that we can work on, or you want to preach about. If you're giving classes, expand these qualities and how, getting them. They're all intrinsic over. So if we meditate on Krishna, we can also get these qualities. This intolerance of another's suffering, that's compassion. So thank you. I have to run. Who is this? All right. Fix it. Put your real name there. Haribol. Thank you.
Thank you, Bhari.
Chaitanya Prema dropped out. Yadinath, thank you for all the Harinam. We see it's really giving me life.
Krishna, Krishna.
Make sure you send, that when I
Thank you
got
very
the
much, Maharaj.
when I got the books, they were quite enlivening. The book scores are not getting out to the African Haribol.
Hare Krishna.